You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to deduce the long-running success of Ian Rankin, the godfather of British crime fiction. What Ian did was this. He rewrote the rules of a genre that's older than Miss Marple. But how?
Ask them. They saw it happen.
Well, by creating Detective Inspector John Rebus, an anti-hero, an old-school breed of cop, and Ian set the books in his hometown of Edinburgh, a grungy version of the city that felt like a crime scene waiting to happen, and people loved it. Rebus was made into a popular TV series.
Dr. Devlin runs, or ran, the maternity unit at Temple Mount Private Hospital.
Ran. He's retired.
He certainly is.
And now, more than 20 books in, Ian is the UK's #1 best-selling crime writer. But after more than 25 years of Rebus, and following the sudden death of 2 friends, Ian has decided to take a break, but not before delivering his latest Rebus book. Set in the build-up to next year's Scottish referendum on independence, it also features another fan favorite, the internal affairs cop named Malcolm Fox. It's called Saints of the Shadow Bible. Please welcome back to the program, Ian Rankin.
As you came into the light. As you came into the light. How are you, man? Welcome back.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I was fascinated when I was reading an article about you that your parents didn't even know you were a writer until they saw your name in a paper.
Yeah.
Because you finished second in a competition.
Yeah, poetry competition. I was 17 and I would sit in my bedroom at night quietly writing love poems to girls I could never ask out on a date. And my parents thought I was doing drugs because I was just sitting there in complete silence. And whenever they came in, I was hiding something under the bed, you know. And my mum came in every 15 minutes with a cup of tea and I'd be the poetry going under the bed. And then I made the mistake of going in for a poetry competition and I won second prize with a poem called Euthanasia, the mercy killing of the elderly, which my great aunt Jenny thought was about her. So it caused a kind of a schism in our family for many years.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting...
It was about her as well.
It really was?
Yeah.
You can say that now.
She's long deceased, yeah.
Was she not nice to you?
She was okay. She kind of ruled her family with a rod of iron, you know.
But it's interesting that I heard that you used to you'd go home at night instead of going out, and you would go hide away and do this stuff and write poetry, which is not normal. It's a sensitive side of you that you wouldn't be able to show in the town you grew up in.
No, I mean, I grew up in it was a small mining town. It was quite rough, very working class. And it wasn't until I got to university and met other people who wanted to be writers that I thought, okay, I can be true to myself and not pretend to fit in.
When you were a kid?
Yeah, totally, because I was living so much of it inside my head, you know? I mean, it wasn't a bleak place, but it was a very ordinary place to grow up. But inside my head, I could be a spaceman. You know, I could be Commander Hadfield in my head. Yeah. I could be James T. Kirk. I could be fighting aliens and zombies. I could be in a rock band, a really successful rock band. And so you're doing that thing that all kids do. You're role-playing and you're playing God. You're recreating the world in your imagination so that it fits what you want it to be. And then what writers are is just kids who refuse to grow up.
It's an interesting opportunity for you, and I don't know if you approach it this way, but when you have this Malcolm character, to go back and look at old cases and cold cases, that you can right wrongs as a writer that maybe you had done back then.
Yeah, or you can just give closure to something. A lot of the scenes in this new book came from retirement parties I was invited to of cops. And there'd be all these old cops there telling stories, trading stories of the old days in the 80s. And I'd be going, just give me a second, guys. And I'd go into the corner with my phone and just punch the stories into the phone as notes and come back and say, just give me another one of those stories.
And I would imagine a lot of officers of the law love to tell you this stuff because they want their stuff to be written down.
Yeah, maybe, but it can get them into trouble sometimes. I was at a pantomime last January. Oh, no, you weren't? Oh, yes, I was. And
I just wanted you to end it after I was at a pantomime last January.
No, I was in the audience on my own at a pantomime, and at half-time, you know, I went out to check my phone, and a cop had sent me a message saying there's been a murder across the street from this theatre where I was. I said, I'm there, I'm right at the theatre. So I went on Twitter and I said, oh, it's really weird. I've just come out half-time pantomime, having a gin and tonic in the bar. Cops just told me there's been a murder across the street. Well, then journalists who follow me phoned up the police and said, what's this about a murder? Ian Rankin knows before any of us. And so then the police launched an investigation to try and find out which cop had told me the story, because nobody was supposed to know.
And you protected the source, right?
Well, kind of, yeah.
What do you mean,
Well, you know, I mean, I didn't say anything.
Right.
I didn't say anything, but I didn't need to. I mean, I knew that we would be okay because there aren't many cops in Edinburgh I don't know.
But this was interesting about the way you approach it, and I love it because I mean, I've read crime or horror since I was a kid, both thrillers and all that, and watched it on television and in cinema. And as time has evolved, almost all of it has become more brutal, more violent. But I don't get that in yours, and this is what I like because it seems like a modern book, but I still don't feel like I'm consuming a lot of the gratuitous violence that I would normally come across. And I imagine that's got to be a choice for you because you've seen the culture shift.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, some people want to push the envelope. They want to go somewhere that nobody's gone before. And one way to do that in crime fiction is to make it more extreme. Is to make the serial killer more extreme than a previous serial killer, to out Hannibal Lecter. And I mean, that was a route I thought about when I was a young writer. And then I had a lovely editor who said, oh, that scene's too graphic. And I said, oh, so I can write crime fiction that isn't graphic? He went, yeah. He said, leave it to the reader's imagination. And the same goes for sex scenes. You know, sex scenes are really hard to write. And there was a sex scene in one of my early books. It was Rebus having sex. And my editor said, can we just leave it at the bedroom door? Because nobody wants to watch John Rebus having sex, right?
But a lot of authors write, and a part of the character is a part of their own life. Did you take that as a personal affront to you in your sex life when you heard that?
No, I was relieved, because it's the hardest thing to... I mean, writing violence is easy. You know, writing a scene where someone gets hit over the head with a hammer is easy. Writing a scene where people are getting intimate, no.
Best left
which is why we don't have an award for gratuitous violence, but we do have an award in fiction for bad sex, called the Bad Sex Award.
Right.
And it's given to a kind of mainstream novel, you know, a proper novelist who's been around for a while, who's written a really terrible sex scene in their latest book.
Is it like a raspberry? Is it a badge of honor when you get that award?
Can be. I've not been up for it yet, but for various reasons, you know, because I don't put sex in my books.
Until they reread your early stuff, maybe they will come across it. You know, I'm glad you mentioned Hannibal, because Hannibal's a great example. Eddie Izzard was in this red chair, and we were talking about the idea of crime and how it's evolved.
Those Poirot-type movies, the Agatha Christie's, there's nothing cozier, and some very safe middle-class people from around the world will just get themselves into bed or into a comfy sofa with a cup of Horlicks, cup of coffee, and watch, there's a dead person. How did they die? Oh, they died like that. And there's nothing cozier than to start off with a death at the beginning of a thing, or Murder, She Wrote. It wasn't Injury, She Wrote. She didn't do that one.
That's the one thing that's stayed true, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, what brings me to the crime novel is what crime tells us about ourselves, what it tells us about society. Crime fiction at its best comes down to a very simple question. Why do human beings continue to do bad things to each other? So Canadian crime fiction will, of necessity, be different from American crime fiction, French crime fiction, African crime fiction, because the society is different, the culture is different. So it's telling us something very basic about ourselves as humans, but also about the society that we've created for ourselves.
What have you learned over the decades writing about where you're from?
That it's a small country, but a very complex country, and that it's looked over its shoulder a lot, that it has always had a feeling that it's been in bed with an elephant. Scotland and England, you know, a country of 5 million versus a country of 50 million. Your nearest neighbour, it is like being in bed with an elephant. And sometimes the trunk... Sometimes the trunk... Well, Canadians and Americans, you know. Sometimes the trunk gets in the way.
Sure can. Who are the storytellers in your family? Because I know that in your dad's family, most of them went in the mine, but not him necessarily, right?
He was the youngest, and I think my gran had said to him, she saw the damage that the mines were doing to the people that worked there, so she persuaded him to go and work in a greengrocer shop. But he was a great liar. I mean, he was a phenomenal liar. He wouldn't tell the truth if a lie would suffice. He would tell me stories at bedtime, and I would go, really? Did that really happen? He'd go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And years later, we'd find out it was all lies, you know? I always dreaded taking girlfriends home, because I never knew what he was going to say to them, you know? But he was a great storyteller, and he had a fund of kind of characters, mythical characters that he would, from the age of 3, 4, he would tell me these stories about these people. And then later on, again, I also realised that some of these incidents were things that had happened to him, but he was reinventing them as fiction. So it worked both ways. So
is that part of the reason why you look... I mean, you were young when your mother passed away, and your father was relatively young too, right?
I was 29 when my dad passed away, 19 when my mom passed away, so yeah.
So you reach a certain age and you're looking around saying, I need to spend time not working, enjoying.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, you know, the kids are 21 and 19. 19-year-old, as you know, has got special needs, but he's in a facility now that's going to look after him 24/7. So there's a little bit more, we can relax a little bit. His brother, 21, he's all grown up, he can look after himself. So my wife and I are looking at each other and going, you know, well, we still can, Why don't we go off and see some of the world, you know?
What do you got to see? What are you ready to see?
I'd love to see a koala bear. I've been to Australia 8 or 9 times, never seen a koala bear, never seen the Great Barrier Reef.
Didn't you tweet a picture of a soaking wet koala bear not that long ago?
Yeah, that was from a newspaper. I've never seen one in the flesh.
I follow him on Twitter, I'm like, what is he doing?
It's a terrible, cruel-looking thing, isn't it? Yeah. A wet koala bear is the funniest thing you've ever seen. Well, I can try it with other animals. Yeah, but I mean, we've done it a little bit with Canada. We came over here last year and we did a long train journey across Canada. Yeah. So I'd like to go back to some of these countries that I tour, but actually see them properly. Right. And go to some places I've never been.
Stick around, more with Ian Rankin right after this.
When you write about cops, the last thing you want to do is come under suspicion by cops. How and why that happened to Ian is next.
All right, you're back here with Ian Rankin, Saints of the Shadow Bible. So, in the early days, an editor said, don't be as gratuitous. As you get older, are you looking for more of it now? Like, how are you finding a way to keep it interesting for you?
Well, I mean, I think it helps that Edinburgh is a very interesting city, and this happens to be a very interesting time to be writing about Scotland. And every time I think I know Edinburgh, there's something else arrives that makes me change my perception or something I want to share with people. So that helps, having a good location. And just, that kind of central thing, it keeps bugging me about why do we keep doing bad things to each other. It just keeps bugging me. Where does evil come from? What do we mean when we use the word evil? Right. I mean, I made a TV series years ago about, trying to look for what do we mean? Does it mean the same thing to different cultures and different times? And it's still kind of gnawing away at me, And crime fiction is perfect for that. Perfect for looking at that.
Well, in crime fiction, I like because often there end up being answers, and I found that in life there are none.
But sometimes that's why crime fiction isn't taken seriously as literature.
Right.
Is because there is a sense of closure there. It's a closed universe. It seems like a closed mechanism, and real life is much messier than that. Now, a lot of people do come to crime fiction for that sense of mysteries being solved, and questions being answered. But if you read my books, you usually find at the end there's a couple of loose ends. Yeah. Because I don't like complete closure, because the universe is a bit messier than that and more interesting than that.
When was the last time you personally ran afoul of the law?
And got away with it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be speeding, right? It would be speeding. So it would be like last week.
Do you ever get pulled over by cops and then they go, it's Rankin again, let him go?
No, quite the opposite. Last year, I turned up at a police station in Inverness to do some research, and they sent a cop out to chase me away.
Seriously?
Yeah, they had no idea who I was. They thought I was a potential terrorist or something.
Thanks, man. Ian Rankin, everybody. Here's the book right here. It's Rebus and Fox together, Saints of the Shadow Bible. We'll be right back.